You know, when psychologists talk about the inner child, it's like everybody's a baby. You know, it's like, you know, you say like to someone, don't be a baby. I am saying, dear viewer, that there's so many ways that we can go about doing something. And I want you, whoever you are, you know, you may judge yourself. Many people go towards spirituality speed. So if your mind moves faster than your body, you can't, like radio wave. This quote is mystic from 1,000 years ago. And this quote was so fascinating that it applies to what I'm saying here. He says, one quote he says, the outward knower and the known are one. Simple people imagine that they should see God as if he stood there and they hear. This is not so. God and I, we are one in knowledge. This is not the quote I was looking for, though. Okay, there we go. I found it. Meister Eckhart says, there exists only the present instant. And now, which always Eckhart reminds me of, you know, the orb was spinning always and without end is itself new. Something that is new and endless. You see, it's like we're living inside an endless novelty. You know? It's like something, it's as if like a writer writing a novel, and it's like it never stops. Is a peaceful heart. In some sort of adventure. That means they could be afraid, but they're like, what am nothing? They are like zero worshippers. And the singularians are like singularity worshippers, right? And so what it means is these are human beings, these are beings in this, a class of being on this planet, where these beings, they're not experiencing themselves self as a world, like a self in a world. They're experiencing, Swami Krishnananda says, religion Eckhart says, God is at home, it is we who have gone out for a walk. Meister Eckhart says, true thing. And it's another way of saying like what Meister Eckhart is saying here. Freedom to be anybody, your real self. Right? So if you're someone who right now in life internally feel limited, see, externally you got to go and do the work, but internally where, you know, this is before the great speakers of the psychedelic era. I'm like, wait a minute, before I try anything, who am I? Before I put attention and concentrated effort, if you were like, yo, doesn't trust its world and advance civil control over what kind of decisions we make, but we have control button that could destroy a humanistic value, that there is another way. And you know, sometimes I was like, what can we believe in a changing world? Like a person can act, like is everybody acting like, you know, they believe? Because it's like every day I wake up, I feel like something new is being added to the moment. Do you know? A new sense of self is emerging. So if I'm a new sense of self every day wake up, how can I have the same belief as yesterday? Unless I believe that truth is the inconceivable force that is changing the conception. What that means is that if you have ever, you know, experienced the moment, you know, there was a time where, you know, financially I had mismanaged, and I remember I was just walking and I was just looking at the side of the street at the curb, and there were the curb, you know. But I remember in that moment I found the humility, and you know, I was like, I hadn't eaten for a few days, and what happened is I went in front of this pond and I just sat in front of this pond, you know, and for a second it was as if like I was inefficiently living as a self. So it was as if I was like, okay, I'm not experiencing, I'm not cultivating the inner realm I want from my outer realm. So let me cultivate the inner realms from the world. That means I sat in front of the pond, and for a moment I became the world. There was nobody that was hungry there. You know, there was nobody that was in some sense who had messed up. There was just, I was present with the world. You know what I'm saying? It's strange. It still feels lonely, if you're meditating in a forest, and but at the same time, you feel like you are in the right place. Because there's something about nature that it doesn't have the ability to judge you. There's been times where I've given a talk and a bird has landed like too close to where I was. The thing, our hearts are causally beyond their shaped effect. But really, in some sense, you attain unconditional being. And this is the bodhisattva archetype. So if a bodhisattva archetype and a Buddha archetype were standing in front of, let's say, standing in front of an individual, right? That individual would be sattva already has been from the top and is going down the bottom of this mountain to go to a different world. Consciousness is ready to experience itself as a world. Right now, we have the capability to be a self in a world. Technology is going to try to replicate us. It's going to be what it is, a passenger, and not care. Love the future so much. I forget the name. But what I'm trying to say is, like, you have an ability to let your circumstance. There was a time machine, and if they're in knighthood and whatnot, okay. And for me, I have this sense that, like, do you know what I'm saying? Right now, there is still royal children, beautiful to it, okay? Not 10. Like, I'm saying this because I was reading articles about, like, what's his name? So they were, right? And I remember that were beside court button, and in my mind, in my inner realms, I felt I was, like, every straw of grass in that grass field was like an audience member to me. There were a bunch of titles. The teacher of teachers on earth, right? And so what that meant is that, in some sense, a sort of communication to the advanced humanity. It's actually a realm of soup, and I'm like, yo, if these guys just freaking networked